Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tech Tuesday. Happy New Year, happy 2023. My name is Dr. Haifa Maamar, and I am the Education Director of Emerging Technologies here at Full Sail University. We're streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So today is our first episode of 2023, and we chose to talk about a rapidly evolving topic, which is the Unreal Engine. And I have with me some like some of the industry experts and education experts that specialize in game engine and game development. So I have with me Phoebe, and we have Shawn and Shawn Kendall and Chad Kendall, who are the actually program directors. The three of them are the program directors of the programs that teach or use Unreal Engine at Full Sail University. So let me start by asking you guys, thank you all for coming today, and thank you for accepting to talk about the Unreal Engine and the game engine in general. How about you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background? So Phoebe, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Phoebe Elefante. I am the program manager for the Game Design Bachelor's programs. I started making media in 2003. I worked on a bunch of stuff, starting with a web magazine, and went into a bunch of different kinds of games, alternate reality games, made some MMOs, all the alphabet soup that you can do in the game industry. And I worked on a lot of edutainment style games. And so I got interested in that cross section of education and games. And I started teaching games and narrative design in about 2014. And then my first introduction to Unreal Engine was back in 2008 or 9. That would have been UE3 at that time.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So let's say, Chad, how about you? We're having some technical... Is Chad with us? Did we lose him?
There he is.
I can't hear him.
You always know you go to a tech school when there are tech problems.
Okay. So Chad, can you hear us? Okay, we still cannot hear him. I mean, that's what a live is we're gonna have we're gonna have different issues, technical issues. So as we're waiting on fixing the audio with Chad, I think I can hear Shawn. So Shawn, what about you introduce yourself and talk a bit about your background?
Sure. Hi, guys. My name is Shawn Kendall. I'm the program director at Full Sail for game development, computer science, and AI. And I got started in computer graphics, in particular real-time 3D graphics, way back in 1999 when I was finishing college. 1995, sorry, when I was finishing college, on these things called Silicon graphics workstations. It's interesting because right at the same time that we were starting to do real-time 3D, we also developed VR. And Full Sail was one of the first places to have a VR lab for students to use. So in 1998, I came to Full Sail to work in the lab. So I'd already graduated, and I got a good job helping teaching to use those systems that long ago. It just seems kind of amazing since VR has become so common now. Going a little bit forward, in the 2000s, we did a number of 3D graphics projects with Sun Microsystems, and in particular, we were trying to develop 3D graphics for the web. And at the time, that was using Java programming language. By the later 2000s, 2009, I started transitioning to mobile graphics in 3D because that's what was also happening. I was sort of tracing the 3D graphics world. I worked on iOS and Android. And at that same year, 2009, the Unreal Engine released with the UDK, which was like the programming environment. And at Full Sail, we adopted that. So we'll talk about that more in the future. Mm-hmm. I was awarded a mobile gaming master's in 2014. And then shortly after, I switched back to programming the sort of the game core language is C++ and DirectX, and got really interested in engines. And then fast forwarding today, in 2022, I helped refresh the Unreal curriculum and the game development degree, and in 2023, we're revising and expanding it to use a lot more. So
that's amazing. Well, thank you, Chad. I still cannot hear you. What about you take your AirPods off?
Oh no.
We can no, we still can't hear. It's funny because we were just rehearsing this and we could hear you. Okay. So I'm going to go to the next question as we're figuring out, like Chad is going to figure out how to fix his audio. Shawn, I'm going back to you here. And I know today we're talking about the Unreal Engine and all the different features that exist and in what industries it's used. But before we go into Unreal and before we go into all these different industries, how about we first explain to our audience what a game engine is? What is it like? How did it start? Like, why is it used and how is it used? And then from there, we'll go into Unreal.
Terrific. So if you go way back to the very beginning of game development, you had a programmer, really even the beginning was just a programmer, like on the Atari area, writing a game, maybe one or two people. Each time they created a game, they would start scratch and start writing code. And of course, the games were incredibly simple by today's standards. You fast forward a little bit and the teams are getting larger, the games are getting larger, and the hardware has got more capability. And we reach a point where each time you wrote a new game, you started to realize, wow, I'm recreating a lot of support programming that was already done in this previous game. So it wasn't too long before people started trying to figure out a way to reuse what we call subsystems in games. And I'll give you a good example of those because they're kind of recognizable in games. So one of them would be rendering, like how the graphics are made, collision in physics, animation, audio, playback, AI, networking, right? Each one of these things could probably be reused somewhat. And, all of software was trying to do this. So eventually, each one of those things became their own, what we call software libraries. And in fact, there was some companies that made the different components and you could like pick and choose and put them together. But as everything matured, eventually we started to bundle them all together in what we call a game engine, because even connecting them all together became, a lot of effort. And a number of different companies and game developers tried to create this over the years. But one of the things that's neat about Unreal is that it's really one of the first one. They started in the beginning too, which is also why it ends up being one of the best. They have the longest history. But that's what a game engine is. It's this collection of reusable components that you would use in your game, so you don't have to start from scratch every single time you make a game. The other thing to note about this is that I mentioned this briefly, but there are some during this, like when this was occurring, some large game companies, if you had the resources, like the EA's types, this kind of thing, would create their own game engines that they kept in-house. So it was like they made a game engine they kept for themselves, but it was like their secret sauce. They didn't really share it and it wasn't put out in the world. When Epic came along, they shared their engine, and this kind of changed the way people thinking about it. And so then now you still have this. Some companies have their own in-house engine. But Unreal is one of the engines that's like in the public space where anyone can go and use it.
And that's a very good point, actually, Shawn. What you're talking about is that I'm going to talk first about those like game studios where they have their in-house engine. So whenever they hire someone, it's going to take them some time to learn that new game engine. They need to train them. There is a lot of like kind of a curve to get to a point where now you know how to use the game engine. But with Unreal being public and then being used by so many game studios, then it kind of make it easy for people to learn and make it easy for education institution also to teach the game development using an engine that's widely used in the industry. So, Chad, how are we doing? Can you hear us? Can we hear you?
He's trying to reset his connection right now.
Okay, so it looks like you're trying to reset your connection. No, we cannot even hear. Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. Well,
we'll get him in here.
Par for the course. In any presentation, something has to fail.
Yeah, well, at least I have both of you here.
Right.
So let's talk about the Unreal Engine 5. It's revolutionizing the entertainment and emerging tech worlds. I mean, I've been hearing about it, like seeing so many videos about the capability of the UE5, and it's impressive. So let's first watch the sizzle reel, and from there we can go into talking about the Unreal, how widely used it is, and so on. Let's watch the Wow, amazing.
Yeah,
I mean,
impressive.
It is impressive. I mean,
Yeah.
all these use cases, you would think that Unreal Engine is only used in games, but then as you're watching that sizzle reel, you see movies, you see simulation, you see games. So kind of like there is no limit in kind of the industries that use the Unreal Engine 5. Let's talk about games first. Let's start with the gaming industry. Can you tell us of some of the popular games that are being built using the Unreal Engine?
Well,
And
of course,
I will let you
we all of course know Fortnite, which is
yes.
their which is developed by Epic Games and which has been around for quite a long time, and they're currently developing UE5. Please.
Can I say something? Is that Fortnite, actually, we have so many alumni from Full Sail that actually worked on Fortnite, and we have so many of our alumni students who also work at Epic and built and helped the Unreal Engine. So just wanted to put it out there. Hey, friends, students, alumni from Full Sail.
Yeah,
we're so proud of you.
I want to say something else about Fortnite too, because of course it's a huge game, but it's also kind of like Unreal and Epic revealed this year. It's also kind of like their secret place to do testing before anybody knows. So there's a bunch of new features they rolled out, in particular things related to networking and this kind of stuff, and they want to promote this in the engine. One of the ways they do that is they'll say, "Hey, we just added this brand new feature to Unreal." And you should use it. And, people might go, well, how can I be sure? And they go, oh, because we actually turned it on 6 months ago in Fortnite. You didn't know that. And that's one of the cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, they use it. It's like they call that eating your own dog food. They use it as the way to show that, for real, we know it's hardened because this super important game that's got to run with lots of people is using that right now. Yeah.
That's amazing. Okay. What about other games?
Of course, some classic favorites like Dragon Ball Z and Star Wars has been developed in Unreal. We have, I don't want to jump on anybody's toes. Of course, there's, I'm a big fighting game fan. So
I am
Street
too.
Fighter.
I know. I used to play that game a lot with my brothers. I mean, yes, Street Fighter, and I was impressed. Like for me, I didn't even think about that being developed with Unreal, and I'm like, oh wow. I used to love it.
If you look at that graphic too, it's really interesting because, we saw a lot of, 3D, and I kept talking about 3D. And of course, these characters are actually animated 3D, but this stylistic way of doing this is really excellent. It still preserves kind of like the roots of that game, but gives it this super high fidelity.
Yeah. And we talked about Dragon Ball Z, and then I know the Star Wars was there. What other games we have? Go ahead.
Right. Fallen Order.
Fallen Order. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there are obviously when they, and we saw some of them in the sizzle reel, but with the introduction of Unreal 5, they've already been working with some studios to develop titles that are using Unreal 5 specifically and will be, some of the first games on the market. I mean, obviously, as Shawn said, Fortnite's already out there, but, there's a Tomb Raider that's going to be coming up. And the second edition of Ark is coming out in UE5. And those are just, that's only a couple of them, but there are there are several that they've released. I think we have some images from a couple of the other games.
Yeah, this
That's
one here is Hellblade. That was an amazing game graphic.
Oh yeah, here's the one from Arc 2. So you can even see in comparison to the graphics from previous versions of the engine. Again, I mean, it's like you can see Lumen happening just
Well, we're gonna talk
screen.
about Lumen.
Yeah,
so
sorry,
before we
ahead.
jump before we jump to Lumen, chat, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh
Can
my
you hear me?
gosh, we did it! Hallelujah! So, welcome, chat, Kendall. If you can please introduce yourself to our audience and explain explain what we're doing, what you're doing at Full Sail.
Yeah, sure. Sorry for the delay, and we can get back into the good stuff. Yeah, so my name's Chad Kendall. I am the program director for the game art program. My background is in fine art, and that's what I went to school for as a painter. And then I was sort of brought into the idea of working in 3D from my brother. And he was kind of showing me some interesting stuff that was happening in VR. So I was initially looking at it from a fine art perspective. And doing things like virtual reality installations and kind of incorporating it even when I was going into school. And then I just sort of found that there was a niche there. There wasn't a lot of fine artists that were working in 3D. So it was nice to kind of be wanted to kind of go in and make them things. So I was able to sort of work in all sorts of different freelance things. Shawn and I started a company together, and that sort of allowed us to work with all sorts of different types of companies. And it's allowed me to kind of jump between doing game stuff, doing simulation, doing tech demos for companies. And, you know, I even got to work on a film last year. So, and all in real-time realm. So, and I've been teaching at Full Sail for 25 years.
I know. Congratulations on you and Shawn. Actually, congratulations on your 25th anniversary. We're so lucky to have you. So I wanted to highlight something here for our audience is that our industry experts and education experts are coming from 3 different fields. We have Chad with the art or game art, Phoebe is with the design, and then Shawn is with development. And the main thing between, or the common thing between the 3 of them is that they're both, or the 3 of them are using Unreal. The way they use Unreal and why they use Unreal and how they use Unreal is different, of course, based on the field. But we're going to be going more deep into what kind of fields are using the Unreal Engine, some kind of use cases that we have there, what kind of skills that are needed, and how to learn the Unreal Engine. So we saw the sizzle reel, and we saw so many different, new cool things that are out there right now. I want us first to talk about the features of the engine. What technology does it support? And then changes from a previous version of the Unreal Engine to this new version, the V5.1. So I know I kind of threw like 3 questions at the same time, but feel free to answer these questions as you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think from a designer standpoint, the really desirable thing about Unreal Engine is it has a lot of capabilities that you can employ in a wide variety of types of games. Mm-hmm. The other thing that it facilitates with Blueprints, which is what they call their visual scripting language. With Blueprints, you can rapidly prototype interactions and features into a game or an experience. And for designers specifically, the ability to rapidly test out your ideas and see how they actually play in real time. In addition to the fact that in 5, they've started to add several of these high ticket items, Lumen being one of them, Nanite being the other one. I'll let these guys speak in more detail to what those things actually do. But from a design standpoint, the developers of the engine have taken so many of the steps out of the refinement process so that as a designer, you can get a much higher quality, more refined prototype just by yourself, honestly, even without the high level capabilities of artists and programmers. So that's huge.
So for me, I'm just going to add something. And you talked about blueprints. I think blueprints is one of the most important features of the Unreal Engine because it allows other, profiles like designers or artists who don't necessarily know how to program things in C++ to use these blueprints, this visual scripture, to do things.
Right.
So it makes it easy, accessible for others to implement things, to build things. So so for me, the blueprint and its accessibility, its easiness, like to use, is the one of the biggest features here.
Yeah.
Especially, we will talk later about other industries who are now using Unreal. For them, again, you don't need to be a programmer to understand how to use Unreal or how to do things. It's really putting these blueprints together, and then you will have your prototype or your whatever you're trying to implement.
Yeah.
Okay, Chad or Shawn.
Yeah, I'd say, from the art side. So we started using Unreal back in 2005. So if you purchased the Unreal Tournament 2004 game, you got an editor with it. And that allowed you as an artist to sort of replace the art that was in there. So if you wanted to make your own levels for the Unreal Tournament game, you could do that. And that's kind of what sort of started us down that road to make things. So just the pipeline of being able to say, hey, I'm going to replace the stuff that's in there with my own stuff. I mean, that's essentially what it kind of came down to on the art side. And then, of course, over the years, it's just gotten better and better. One of the things that was really impressive when we went into UDK and Unreal 4 was their material editor, and being able to make really complex materials that do just about anything. And even Unreal 3 actually was a kind of a big jump for that when we got into normal maps and all kinds of things like that. So it's always just been, they sort of just make it easier and easier for the artist to get into the stuff that's interesting and get sort of past a lot of the technical hurdles. And then with 5, it's gone even further, right? Because now we're talking about completely upending the lighting system with Lumen and the LED system with nanite. So there's just millions.
So we're showing something
so
about
much
Lumen. So if you can explain the differences between the 5.1 and the other versions.
Well,
What is Lumen
so
and how
the real quick way to think about it from the art perspective, because we're dumb and we just like to make things look pretty. So, when you're making, prior to this, when you were doing lighting in a game, it was normally a bunch of different systems going on. So it was like one system for the environment, and maybe one system for dynamic things, and you're mixing a bunch of things together. On the technical side for us as artists, we had to prep our models in a certain way so that they would accept light maps. And it was a kind of a long process to calculate all of that lighting. And so now with Lumen, it's basically using ray tracing. That is the sort of thing that has been used in films for years to light everything dynamically. And it sort of lights it dynamically and uses global illumination. So it's bouncing off all the objects. You're getting color bleed and all this, and it just happens in real time. So you don't have to recalculate it. You don't have to do sort of special light mapping. It's all kind of one big system. Yeah.
Hey, while we have this slide up, so wait, go back. I want to talk about it, even though it's hard. So this is one of those great things, like you kind of have to stare at it a while. So like, when you see this at a glance, it's like, okay, so the one is oranger than the other one, right? That's like your immediate takeaway. But if you stare at this for a little longer, and even as a developer, I have to work in graphics. It's like looking at this minutia is amazing, and it's hard to explain. It's hard to express. Not that it's improved. I'll point out some things. It's that the way you make it is so much easier. Like the development process for the user is so much better. But if you look out the window, you can see the cars in both pictures, right? And on the right side, in the old system, you can see the car lighting looks really weird. It's like the car is dark, but the light is bright, and the grass looks off, even though it's bright outside. And this is what Chad was talking about. It's like, well, the lighting outside doesn't really match the lighting inside in that shot, but in the other one, they're totally matched. If you look under the table, you can see the stool. And on the one on the right, it almost looks like it's painted. It doesn't really look like a 3D space because there's no shadows. But on the other one, it's completely lit. So it's just like that. As you look around, you can sort of spot like all these amazing details. And again, the real key is that in the left side, the artist basically just said, turn on the system and use the materials as the way that I said it is, and then it works properly. So. Okay, so I'll tell some developer feature type stuff. One of them, of course, is that, and this is kind of a way you can kind of, I don't know if we're all arranged, if I can point over to Chad. So Chad makes assets up
The
here.
other way. Do
Okay,
this.
all right, okay. So he makes 3D assets, right? Which is like typically 3D models. Sometimes you would make them outside of Unreal, but then you bring them in, and he doesn't have to worry about the interactive and programming going because he can use example projects. And then Phoebe, like this. When the designers are going to use Blueprint. That's like their major tool. And we'll probably talk to them more. And a developer wants to use C++. That's the main thing they use to develop games across the board. And sure enough, you can do that in Unreal. Like that's how we teach it. So even across these 3 different disciplines, we teach totally different systems in Unreal. And you can learn them in isolation. But even better, when you know them, you can all work together at the same time. That's one of the really amazing things. We'll talk more about the full cell side of that, but that's another major part of what makes Unreal great. It's like it doesn't just provide all these features; it combines your whole work team.
Actually, I would love to talk about it now since you're bringing it. For me, I'm like that's one of the highlights that happened at the end of last year, where like these 3 amazing people decided to finally collaborate together and work together, and the output will be amazing. So Shawn, if you want to talk about it.
Sure. So it's for us forever, it's been a vision of like when a student gets to a project course, we want them to be able to work with other students in their class, so they're all working together. But ideally you'd be like, well, depending on if you're trained enough and mature enough, you just look in the senior level, you could potentially work with other degree programs if we could coordinate it all. And there's like the human logistics problem, but there's a huge tech problem trying to do that. I mean, it's very difficult to say, hey, artists, produce art for this student's project that they haven't built yet, this kind of thing. Like it's difficult to work it out. But we integrated Unreal into the process, and it completely solves the problem for us. The students can now, from all different degrees, work together on projects as long as they have the background of how to work in the space they do in Unreal. And then all the team dynamics and all that kind of stuff. But of course, this allows us to have much larger projects with much bigger teams and much more realistic experience. It's really just, it's for me, it's super exciting because we finally kind of rolled it out in a big way in 2022, and in 2023 we're going to be going to degrees that aren't game and art degrees. Like we'll be reaching out to AI and to CS and other degrees that we wouldn't normally think, but make sense connecting together, and it's just going to be amazing.
Yeah, I would love that. Okay, so one thing that Unreal has and is also known for is Metahumans, which is a complete framework that gives any creator the power to use highly realistic humans or human characters in any way imaginable. Before we talk about this, and Chad, I'm going to look at you here because I feel from an art perspective, this is really your wheelhouse. Let's first watch the sizzle reel, and then we're going to go back to you and talk about it.
I could be one of many.
主人公にだってなれる.
Je pourrais être architecte.
Ou guide.
Quizá un artista. You create the narrative. I
am Metahuman.
Wow.
I know, that's
impressive. I mean, every time I watch,
Every
Yeah,
time I
every
see it, I'm
time.
just like, what the heck, you know?
Every time I watch this video, I'm like, I don't know what to feel. I mean, like, yes, I'm impressed because of like this technology and like the things that we can do now. I mean, I remember when I went to CES in last year, actually in 2022, they had something. They were showing Metahumans, and I was sitting there, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this can't be real. But every time I see it now, even in the video, I'm like, okay, I love the whole idea of the technology, but then I'm like, okay, but at the same time, this is scary. Like, so
Those
let's talk.
eyes and the eyelashes, it's like crazy.
I
You
know.
didn't spot it the first time. Like the hair and the eyes and the skin textures are just incredible.
Yeah, it's so realistic. So, Chad, can you tell us of some examples or some use cases where we can use the metahumans?
Yeah, so one of the best things that Unreal has showed off is it was like the end of 2021 they released the Matrix Awakens demo. That was this sort of major giant city, and there was something like 35,000 unique metahumans walking around the town. And of course, that's sort of a perfect use case. You want to fill a city with life. You want them to be going about their business and walking around while you're playing the game. And so just from a game perspective, you really want to focus your attention on, main players and things like that. And so if you can populate these worlds with all these other characters that you put together or that were sort of put together modularly, then by all means allows you to sort of put your attention elsewhere, maybe in more important spaces. And it's not like it's brand new to kind of make avatars in this way. The technology's been around, but I think what Unreal has done is sort of take the fidelity to this next level, and realize that it's not just a character model. You still have all of these control systems that are built in so that you can kind of keyframe animate it. You can do performance capture, so the artists can take those things and do all sorts of different types of things with it. So it certainly changes the approach when you're dealing specifically with human characters. And obviously there's going to be use cases outside of games, right? Anytime you need to just populate a space, you've got them there. So.
Well, actually, I was even thinking, I'm like, I can see that. And I don't know if it exists already. So maybe, Shawn, if it's like we can use these metahumans and then add AI to it and then use it in a use case where like it can smile to you based on whatever, like, scenario it's going through, smile to you or like react to whatever you're saying, or maybe follow what you're doing, depending on the situation you're in.
I think in 2023 we're destined to have some student project in AI that does.
Oh, right. Let's do it.
That just does it. But something to point out about the AI that for people watching might not get this if they haven't seen this kind of thing. So we just saw like this really good video of computer graphics of faces, but you have to keep reminding yourself that that's real time. Like you said, you saw it at a conference. Like you want to see this running on your screen because it's not just the video; it's like completely can respond immediately.
Yes.
That's the thing that's so amazing. It's spooky in how realistic, and then when it's when it's aware of you in an AI framework, it's just it completely fools you. It's quite amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to 2023 and using these metahumans with AI now. There you go. That's it. I'm coming up with a new project. We're just gonna make it. Phoebe, I don't know. I feel like I don't know if you have anything to add here from a design perspective.
I think that the metahumans are sort of a similar asset for designers that megascans are. Megascans are one of the new technologies, or rather they work with Nanite, which is one of the new big ticket items that Unreal 5 has introduced. And because it allows for this flexible geometry, it allows for really high fidelity assets to be used without taking up too much of your server load, essentially, which is a constant battle for designers. But with the metahumans, it's really, I have an idea. I have an idea for a character. I have an idea for a gameplay experience, and I can make it and I can incorporate it into my interactions. I can attach programming to it in the same way that I would any other animated 3D model. And so it just allows you again, so many of the steps that you would have had to wait for in your prototyping process in the past, you no longer have to wait for. And that just means, again, more honing, more refinement over a much faster time frame.
I love it. I love it. So let's switch gears now. We talked about games. Let's talk about another industry that's growing so fast. And it's, I mean, I'm going to use revolutionary. But
It's taking her breath away.
it is with virtual production. So in a previous episode, we talked about virtual production and how it is creating a new era for filmmaking through emerging technologies. And then during that episode, also we talked about the importance and the big role that the Unreal Engine plays in virtual production. So before we talk about virtual production here at Full Sail and so on, let's first watch this video from Unreal that shows how we use Unreal in virtual production. And then we'll come back and talk about Full Sail in this.
Hold up.
It's fine. Well, from there, like all the use, like the different examples that for virtual production and how Unreal is being used. I mean, obviously at Full Sail, we saw the need, a major need, to build our own virtual production studio, the V1 Studio. I'm just going to play quickly this video about the V1 Studio here at Full Sail. And then after that, we're going to come back and talk how are we specializing in virtual production here at Full Sail. So let's play the video. This is amazing. So, yeah, virtual production actually is, here at Full Sail, we specialize specifically in one main thing. Just to say quickly something, you know how in filmmaking before they used to like have to travel, go some places because they need to shoot like some scenes, but now with virtual production and with the Unreal Engine, then they can easily develop or implement these scenes or build these scenes and then shoot these scenes in a virtual production studio. But Chad, if you can please walk us through what we do exactly in the V1 Studio or at Full Sail that is different, or we specialize in that is different from what other studios do.
Yeah, so virtual production kind of covers a whole broad bit of from previs all the way to in-camera visual effects. And it's important to say that the Studio V1 is really just the beginning of our virtual production side of things. Now, I will say in terms of that studio, in that case, we're really talking about in-camera with an LED wall, right? So in those situations, we are, building scenes that's being driven by Unreal Engine, that's being put on these massive screens, which in our case is 40 foot wide and 16 feet tall. And it's, a combination of the graphics that we are that are being produced with Unreal Engine, but also a live camera that's sending data to a virtual camera in Unreal that's matching what that camera is doing, and so that it will skew sort of what's on screen correctly, so that it looks, so that you get parallax, which is a situation where things closer to you move faster than things farther away, like that are behind you. But it's not just like the position of the camera. We're also getting all kinds of camera data, like the focal length and how it's focused. All of that sort of comes back to the engine as well to change all of those types of things. So it's really it's pretty interesting, and it lets you just sort of open a window into that world. And we've already started doing, not only have we shot a feature in there, what it really opens up is the ability to not just for us, but in virtual production in general, just, not just major films and TV shows, but also, commercials and smaller scale things that you would never think, hey, we could shoot in the Himalayas. You can just go ahead and make the Himalayas. And so it's, it's really exciting. And like I say, it's just the beginning, because we also have been doing motion capture for a number of years at Full Sail. And so we're already sort of working in that sort of performance capture, like live performance capture. We're already doing some of that work. You saw some of it in the Unreal video where the character was kind of doing the same thing in real time. We're already doing some of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of our next step that we're going to be getting into. And it's game art and computer animation.
I love that. And actually, that's not only game art and computer animation. There is the film students, game
Right.
art, computer animation, but now also we're trying to have the game development and game design students as well help with this whole thing as well. Maybe develop some features for them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So we've got a list.
Good. Bring it.
Well, yeah, it's funny because we're like moving as fast as we can, because I went to see a bunch of their work in there and watched how they used Unreal, and they immediately were like, so do you have any students have used any of the virtual production in the game, because we need those people to come in. And I'm like, oh my god, okay, we're going to try to figure out how to do this, because at every tier, whether you're doing blueprints, a C++, I mean, the stuff that runs the cameras is so advanced, you totally need developers in that space. So and that's in our own studio, not to mention all of the places that are building these studios that need people to work on that stuff.
Yeah, of course. Yes. Okay, so we talked about games, we talked about virtual production. So these are two main industries. But there is another industry, simulation in aerospace. So on November 28th, of 2022, Lockheed announced they will be engaging Unreal for aerospace simulation research and development. And I mean, it was kind of good, big news, like for Lockheed and aerospace to go towards Unreal to build some of their features or some of their programs. It shows you how big Unreal is right now. So, Shawn, I'm looking at you here. If you can tell us what this means and what is coming up.
Sure. So, the military and training in particular have a fair similar overlap of needs that game developers is. It's kind of interesting. It's almost identical, except for they don't have to make things that are fun, and game developers have to make things that are fun. There is this thing called negative training that's worth pointing out, and it kind of is important for simulation. So if you build a simulation, let's say it's a vehicle trainer. So I'm building something to train troops how to drive a tank. The really big difference between game code and like tank simulator code is that it has to be accurate in such a totally correct way that you can't do this thing called negative training, which is you don't want to train them incorrectly because your simulation isn't accurate. This is like a known problem in simulation for a very long time. And so it tends to make, just like, you'd expect code that has to go into the Artemis to be heavily, carefully examined code is similar for trainers. They have to be very accurate. The fact that Lockheed is now adopting Unreal sort of expresses that, yeah, Unreal has reached the gold standard of having a simulation engine that is good enough for something of that level.
Yes.
And so now seeing, this is like, it was already being adopted, but when that comes out, it means many military trainers, so typical vehicle trainers or something use a game engine for. Another one that's really interesting is aircraft maintenance and repair. This is where when you go open an aircraft engine, there's just a zillion parts, and they use augmented reality goggles and Unreal to overlay everything so that you aren't looking at a paper manual or even a computer manual. You're looking at the thing and it can tell you the status of it. This is pretty advanced AR stuff, and in a lot of walks of life, not like the value isn't there, but in a place like airplane maintenance, it totally does pay off. They're actually doing this for architectural as well. And then the last one that was really interesting in this space is in healthcare. They're using Unreal to create an orthopedic surgical trainer in VR, surgery in VR that's based on Unreal Engine. So it's definitely so that for sim, those are my sims right there. Yeah. There's more.
Yeah, yes. I mean, like for me, Unreal being used in the military, it's a huge. And then, of course, training simulations have been Unreal has been widely used there. But thank you for showing the healthcare part of it, like the VR part of it. What other options do we have? What other industries where we are using Unreal right now?
One of the areas that I think is really cool is that Unreal is marketing pretty heavily to fashion designers to use Unreal as a forum for not just developing designs, but also, of course, showcasing them in live virtual productions. We've seen concerts happening inside of Unreal, which are being filmed and manipulated in real time with VFX and so fashion commercials. I know a lot of animators who are starting to work in Unreal to develop assets, visual effects, as well as 3D assets for commercials and advertising. That's only just a few. I know
Yes,
Shawn and
yes.
Chad want to speak to a couple of the other ones.
Yes. Chad, do you have any other examples to give of industries who are taking advantage of Unreal and using Unreal?
Yeah, I think architectural visualization, or AEC, architect engineering and construction, that world is sort of shifting to stuff that's going to be really VR driven, and so Unreal Engine kind of contributing to that. It sort of changes everything because, and especially with 5 and Lumen, the ability to be able to change lighting on such a quick scale, but previous, say for example, even on a small scale, if you were doing a home and the client wanted to maybe see some different fixtures or different floor materials, that might be really complicated, but they could be remotely in VR in Unreal and be able to switch out those things really quickly just to get a feel for what those spaces are like. And we have started to see companies that are using this to get leases. So if you have, if you're building a skyscraper or some large office building, you're going to have a lot of those signed off first before you get the funding for it. And so they're taking a lot of those people through, and they can show them what their offices are going to like. They can show them what their views are going to be like, different times of day, different times of the year, just by changing sort of the atmosphere outside. So they can do some really complex things with that sort of thing. And it's just using VR and using the Unreal Engine in an architectural. Some of the stuff on architecture, if you are to search up architectural rendering in Unreal, is some of the craziest looking stuff you'll see out there. The most realistic for sure.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's go back to now. We talked about all these different industries that are using Unreal and how Unreal is done and so on. I want us to go back to Full Sail and talk about how are we currently using Unreal at Full Sail. So I know, Chad, you mentioned that the game art started using Unreal, or Unreal became integrated in your program back in 2004, if I'm not mistaken, or 2003?
2005, when it was just a computer animation class. One class in the computer animation program, and that's where we started out. And
How about the other
program from
game
there?
design? Yeah. Go ahead, sorry.
So I understand.
And then...
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that, we really sort of, when Game Art launched in 2009, that's when it really sort of became the backbone of the program. And so it was just about everything that we were going to be doing was going to be in Unreal. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, Phoebe, you can
Sorry,
talk.
I'm excited. No, so when the game design bachelors launched in 2011, we were using Unreal starting right away.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
How about game development?
So Chad mentioned some of the history of the how Unreal came to be and all this kind of stuff, but the game development program is sort of followed along like right from the start, similar to the art program as well. The first time we were using it in curriculum was when the Unreal UDK version came out, which was like the programmer's version of being able to do things with Unreal, and that was in 2009. And then in various incarnations, it would be in different parts of the program as it changed, because of course it changed significantly over the years.
Of course. Okay, so I want us to show, I mean, I'm very excited when I received all these videos that you guys sent me about student work. I want us to show some of our student work and then talk about how you guys are collaborating together and what kind of skills are you trying to give your students in your programs. So let's show the first video.
Okay, so starting off, we are going to move towards the elevator. We have 0 fuel for our jetpack, and we cannot reset. 5 minutes on the clock, and let's head over to our first checkpoint. Now, from here, we have this little gap that we just can't make it, so press the reset, and we get a little bit of fuel to dash right over our gap. Okay, so now this next part, another checkpoint, and an even bigger gap. Now we're going to have to use these crates in order to jump right across, and here is our first fueling station, which will give us enough fuel to boost upwards. Yep, without moving, we boost right up. Now, here's our first time puzzle. Closes the door as soon as the time is over, but have no fear because we can just dash before the door closes. Now here's the same thing, except we're going to do a little bit of vertical movement along with our horizontal, and we just jump up here, boost onto this other place, and boost up here, and same thing, and we beat it with plenty of time to spare.
So I should say this is from the game design undergraduate program, and so this is one of the projects that our students in the game design program do in their first portfolio class. So this is an example of one of the student projects, and obviously what they need to build is when we adopted Unreal Engine 5 at the beginning of 2022 in this class, what we did was we decided to use one of the prefab kind of kits that they launched as a way to illustrate some of UE5's capabilities, and that was called the Stackobot kit. So it kind of came with that little cute little bot and a bunch of sort of pre-programmed features into it so that the bot already can do some things. By the time they get to that portfolio course, they're now adding features, using blueprints to add features into that kit and design their own series of levels and games. So they're using all of those prefab assets, but in the portfolio, really what they're doing is they're illustrating their design thinking. And that's really what the purpose of a walkthrough video like that is. So that's for our undergraduates, we assume that they don't know anything about a game engine, anything about coding in C++, anything about visual scripting before they arrive. And so that's, that's the 4th month of access to UE5.
Oh, yeah.
So that's just
I love all those little mechanics. It's such a great example of mechanics, not to mention the guy played it perfectly. That's like, I was just thinking about how many times you'd have to replay that to get it right. But all that balancing and mechanics are going on there was really awesome. I dig it. That's so cool.
Yeah. And that's right at the beginning of the program. So,
I mean, I love the idea that, like, when you told me it's in the project portfolio 1, I was amazed because, as you said, students at that level, they still don't know, but that game shows like the capability that it is out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, over the course of the rest of the program, they're building 4 more games, and that it finalizes with their final project in the capstone sequence, and they have 4 months to develop. And so the stuff that we're seeing come out of there for the students that are just now, who've matriculated all the way through, who are just now using UE5 for those final projects. So we're starting to see some really, really cool stuff, some work in progress stuff coming out of the capstone sequence.
I'm so excited about this.
Yeah.
So what are some of the career opportunities that exist out there with using the Unreal Engine or learning the Unreal Engine? I'm not talking specifically about game design, like I'm talking in general. For these students, how important it is for them to learn the Unreal Engine or a game engine, and what industries they can apply to. And anyone, guys, feel free to just jump. I don't want to just put you here on the,
Sure.
on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, I would say from an artist side, really quickly, it's become the norm that an artist needs to have some experience with an engine, and they're going to have a pretty good feel of a pipeline, whether the company uses that engine or not. It's still going to be sort of the understandable, here's the art pipeline or a general art pipeline to getting things there. But I think where it really ends up being useful to students is not just game companies, is that there's just going to be so many companies that are expanding into this, to using the software for whatever. And if you can go in there and show that kind of proficiency, you might be able to be the only artist in an architectural firm, for example, and do everything that they need to do, and even blueprint your own changes and things like that. So it's definitely helpful to kind of to know that sort of backbone because of how much you can do on your own now.
Yeah, I would say for developers, one of the main things about Unreal, I mean, this has been true. So what I was going to say is that you learn the skill sets that are very transferable. The thing is Unreal starting to get so advanced beyond everyone else's engines that maybe that it'll be a little, eventually when the other ones catch up, maybe it's still transferable. But yeah, when you learn to work inside of Unreal and you understand all of the subsystems, which the intent is that you could implement them in some other engine. I mean, that's a super transferable skill all over the place in terms of software development. Even though if you were just going specifically for game, it's actually one of the reasons why we're trying to introduce it into other degree programs that are not necessarily game oriented, because a CS graduate who can say, well, yeah, I've programmed in Unreal, just opened the door to all kinds of things and it gives them really options. Like maybe they chose CS and they didn't want to pick game, but maybe they still need to do visualization, and this really can solve the problem for them. So it just super opens the door for all kinds of possible career opportunities, and not to mention understanding how to work with other teams and all this kind of stuff too.
Of course.
And I think with any emerging technology, anything within that umbrella, you're looking also at the spaces in between established industries, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, on Netflix, I don't know if you guys have seen, they have a couple of interactive animated series. Well, when you can start shooting film inside of a game engine in real time, you can also start adding in programmatic effects and programmatic capabilities into that experience. So then once you start bringing in real-time motion capture and you start exploring those areas in between interactivity and cinema and sort of live production and, sort of prefab programmed assets, you really start to create some opportunities where you're making up your own career. Nobody had virtual production until someone said, I could do this more easily in this piece of software.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay, I know we're way over time, but I want to take some of the questions of our online audience. So the first question, do different industries have preferred tools, or is the Unreal Engine becoming the industry standard? And whoever feels like they can
I'll jump in just for dev to start. So there's some companies that are super ingrained and have their own engines, and they've spent a lot of money on them, so of course they want to keep them up. That said, and I'm trying to think of a couple right now, but there was a couple notable announcements in 2022 where companies that had their engines and they were famously engines, they announced they're switching to Unreal. So it is really starting to. The thing is, you spend a lot of time developing these subsystems, and then you put a game out, and you have to do both. And I think game companies are starting to understand that if they want to put out games, then they should put out games. If they want to make technology, then they should have probably done that separately. And it's a lot like operating systems and applications. I mean, you know, Windows is needed to do all our applications, and once it becomes a standard on a certain set of hardware, that's what you want to use, and that's really happening quite a bit in the developer side of game development for sure.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
second question. Oh, I don't know, Chad, did you want to add?
Well, I was gonna say it's pretty ingrained, even though it's very new. It's hard to say ingrained when you have such a new, but I mean, virtual production is Unreal was like, oh, we want to be all over that.
Yes.
And it wasn't, you know, it wasn't by accident that worked out that way. But you know, they really are. If somebody's doing a virtual production, has a setup out there, they're running it with Unreal almost exclusively. So yeah.
Okay, second question. In this industry, do you see opportunities for film graduates?
Yeah,
Of course.
of course.
We've been talking about virtual production the whole time. So I would say, yes, of course. If you are a film graduate or a film student, please go to learn more about virtual production. See how, if you are a current student at Full Sail, go try to see how you can be, how you can help with the V1 Studio and learn more about this technology. Chad, I don't know if you want to add
I was
anything.
just talking to I just talked to a film student the other day. I was on set, and he was working on, he was doing some editing of stuff that our students had made months prior. So, you know, it's funny with the green screen setup, it used to be like you would get all of these live shots and then you would fill in the rest. But now we're sort of on the pre-pro side. So we're sort of delivering the stuff before the shoots happen. So I was able to see, you know, what some of the stuff looked like, and it's crazy. I'm super excited about what the students have already done. So the collabs are getting pretty standard in there. So if you're a film student, there's a good chance you're going to be working in there. So
Amazing. The next question, how can Unreal be used in education, like for the medical field? I can take that question. So for that specifically, Unreal can be used where we can create, for example, different labs to, for example, for the heart, you can easily be, if you are in the medical field, for example, you can easily learn about the heart or other organs by having someone create that, the heart in Unreal, and then using virtual reality where now you're interacting, going inside the heart, or turning the heart, manipulating the heart, turning it around to be able to learn more about it. There are so many different also trainings that exist in Unreal where nurses, for example, can practice different skills. We have that with Advent Health here at Full Sail. So there are different scenarios and use cases where Unreal can be used, and specifically in the medical field. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add. Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I guess the one thing to add about that is that a lot of Unreal, when it comes to Unreal training for healthcare, there's two ways to think of it. One, it was like education, which is what you said. I think it was the question originally. And then there's like field work. And if you're doing field work, then there's a lot of VR related training because you're simulating the environment that you would be in, and you're practicing these things that you need to do. For sure, we at the Advent Health Lab, we have one where they're doing the injection in the arm and all that stuff. So.
Great, thank you. Following next question, can you talk about the differences between the Apex destruction system in UE4 versus the chaos system in UE5? That's not my field whatsoever.
I was going to say, my understanding, although I can't speak to the details about the geometry, my understanding is that that Unreal was planning to phase out Apex destruction in favor of the chaos system, but I'm guessing that these gentlemen can speak to the specifics of it.
Can you guys say more?
Yeah, I think chaos is sort of the norm of the destruction system, and moving forward. That's going to be kind of the way that it goes. I think, I don't know specifically whether or not they might keep both. Sometimes there's a little bit of that kind of stuff going on, but the chaos system is it's fantastic. When you can sort of give physical attributes to every kind of thing in your game. There's so many things that we used to fake in games that's becoming sort of part of the real stuff. I can remember so many times of making things where we're like, okay, you shoot it enough at this point, then we'll switch it to this one that's falling over. But it would only fall over the way you made it fall over, So the fact that you can kind of just go in there and give physical attributes to all sorts of surfaces is pretty awesome.
So there's a related tech, because I don't know chaos too well, but I know a little bit about Niagara for the person who asked that question, and this might frame that a little bit. So the new particle system, it was called Niagara in the old system, but really the Niagara system in 5.1 is much more advanced. Here's one of the ways to think about the differences and why they like changed two major systems. The change between 4 and 5, some of the stuff that's the guts underneath of it is set up to better utilize your GPU cards. So it's the physics system and the particle system are using hardware acceleration in a way that they just couldn't do in 4. And that's one of the reasons why they might change a system entirely, because sometimes it's hard to transition it and they just write a new one. But whoever asked that question, they can like email me and we'll talk about it.
So, guys, whoever asked that question or anyone who's interested, please go ahead and send all your emails to Shawn Kendall. We're going to take one last question. We're way over time. So what is the next step that Unreal can take to make game building even easier than it is today?
Well, I just want to, I want to say something without giving away other people's proprietary information. But I
please
think,
don't. Like,
right,
don't
right, no, right, of course. So I think, if you look at what Unreal is doing, what they every time they expand their capabilities, they're sort of replacing skill sets, right, that you need in order to build interactions. I would guess that the next step is related to music and sound production. If you look at, the complexity of like the modeling and animation capabilities that are in Unreal now, I think you're probably going to be looking at audio, certainly things built on top of Unreal, like in the form of plugins and that sort of thing. You're already seeing all kinds of expansions. If I had to guess, I would guess audio.
Audio. Anyone wants to take
Yeah,
a guess?
I mean, in 5, they've already added a bunch of modeling tools, like things that you used to have to go back to your original DCC or digital content creation tool, like Maya or whatever, and fix. You're like, I got to move this vert. You have to go all the way back, fix that vert, re-import it. Now you can do all of those adjustments or just start from scratch in Unreal. That's a major thing, because sometimes you just need to make a box. And having to go through that whole process just to make a box, where you can just, make, a box and make a fancy box. You can start to do some actual modeling. So I think you're going to see the modeling tools just improve. I think that's going to be something that they really throw at it.
Yeah, the modeling tools is I'm stumbling myself here a little bit, but I was just thinking, so they used to couldn't really model in Unreal at all, and the fact that they added it is already like an amazing. The other part is the animation. So even in the current version, they added all of the support for animation and modeling that we used to. The previous thinking was you did that somewhere else and you imported it, and because they built it into it now, people are just starting to catch up. Like, wow, geez, I got to train up. I got to learn how to use that. So expanding those is definitely cool, but I'll throw one really total moonshot here, because I think the stuff is amazing and it's just doing super great. But I imagine that somewhere in the labs, they are working on some sort of AI support to your game production pipeline. That's probably secret under wraps.
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, and when I say that, I mean, like, we have game AI that's like enemies and stuff. I'm talking about like technologies that are assistive in the game production process. That is bound to be, somewhere in there. And I will.
Right. Like, you pulled up this node. You must want to use this one next. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree. Well, this has been amazing, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for your knowledge, your expertise, for sharing this much with our audience. And thank you all who have been watching us either through LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. Well, stay tuned for another episode of Tech Tuesday next month. Thank you. Have a good day.